In the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of royal tradition echo through marble corridors, a single moment was about to rewrite the future of the British monarchy. As Princess Catherine stood before the ornate French doors leading to the state banquet hall, she had no idea that the evening ahead would mark the most significant transformation in her royal journey since her wedding day. The whispers had been growing louder among palace staff for weeks. Something extraordinary was brewing behind closed doors. King Charles, known for his careful consideration of royal protocol, had been in secret discussions with his most trusted advisors. Tonight, in front of distinguished French dignitaries and the world's media, he would make an announcement that would send shockwaves through royal circles and capture the hearts of millions. What rare honor was about to be bestowed upon the Princess of Wales? What ancient tradition was King Charles about to revive? And why had he chosen this particular moment, this specific gathering, to change the course of royal history forever? The answers would unfold in the most spectacular royal evening in decades, where every glance, every gesture, and every word would be scrutinized by a world watching in anticipation. This is the story of how one remarkable woman earned the rarest of royal recognitions, and how a king's bold decision would reshape the monarchy for generations to come. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine lawns of Windsor Castle as Princess Catherine walked through the private gardens, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. It was a crisp November morning, and she had just finished her daily workout in the castle's private gymnasium. The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves from the groundskeeper's work, and the peaceful atmosphere gave no hint of the extraordinary events that were already in motion. In a secure office 3 floors above, King Charles sat behind his mahogany desk, studying a leather-bound document that had been retrieved from the royal archives just days before. The pages, yellowed with age, contained details of a royal title that had not been granted in over 2 centuries. His private secretary, Sir Clive Alderton, stood quietly by the window, knowing the weight of the decision his monarch was contemplating. The title in question was the Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in Diamonds, an honor so rare that only 3 women in British history had ever received it. The last recipient was Queen Victoria's own daughter, Princess Louise, in 1887. The title came with extraordinary privileges and responsibilities, effectively making the recipient one of the most powerful women in the Commonwealth. King Charles had been considering this decision for months, ever since he witnessed Catherine's remarkable handling of the recent constitutional crisis involving the Scottish Parliament. Her diplomatic skills had prevented what could have been a serious constitutional breakdown, earning praise from political leaders across the spectrum. But it was more than just one incident that had convinced the king she deserved this recognition. Over the past year, Catherine had quietly undertaken some of the most challenging royal duties with a grace and intelligence that reminded many observers of the late Queen Elizabeth II at her peak. She had successfully mediated a trade dispute between British and Canadian agricultural interests, personally visiting farms in both countries, and crafting a solution that satisfied all parties. Her work with mental health initiatives had resulted in groundbreaking legislation that was being studied by governments worldwide. The king's decision was also influenced by private conversations he had held with his mother before her passing. Queen Elizabeth had spoken often of her admiration for Catherine's natural instincts for diplomacy and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life. In one of their last conversations, the late queen had expressed her belief that Catherine possessed qualities that could help modernize the monarchy while maintaining its essential traditions. As Charles reviewed the historical precedents, he was struck by the parallels between Catherine's situation and that of previous recipients. Each woman who had received this honor had done so during a period of significant change for the monarchy. Princess Louise had received it during the height of the Victorian era's expansion, when the British Empire was reaching its greatest extent. The second recipient, Lady Mary Cambridge, had earned it for her work in establishing hospitals during World War I. The third, Princess Alice of Battenberg, had been honored for her humanitarian work during World War II. Now, as the monarchy faced the challenges of the 21st century, King Charles believed it was time to revive this tradition. The world was watching as Britain navigated its post-Brexit identity, dealt with economic uncertainties, and faced growing questions about the relevance of constitutional monarchy. Catherine had proven herself to be exactly the kind of royal the institution needed to face these challenges. The decision to announce the honor at the French state banquet was carefully calculated. The visit by President Emmanuel Macron represented a crucial moment in Anglo-French relations, And having Catherine receive this historic recognition during the event would send a powerful message about Britain's commitment to international cooperation and diplomatic excellence. 3 days before the banquet, Charles called Catherine to his private study at Buckingham Palace. She arrived thinking they would discuss the usual protocol for the evening's events, but the king had something far more significant on his mind. As she entered the elegantly appointed room, lined with portraits of their predecessors, Catherine could sense this was not going to be an ordinary meeting. The king gestured for her to sit in one of the antique chairs facing his desk. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air between them. Charles studied her face for a moment before speaking, noting the calm confidence that had become her trademark over the years of royal service. He began by thanking her for her dedication to the crown and her exceptional performance in representing Britain abroad. Catherine listened attentively, wondering where the conversation was leading. The king then pulled out the leather-bound document he had been studying and placed it on the desk between them. As he explained the nature of the rare honor he wished to bestow upon her, Catherine's composure never wavered, though her eyes widened slightly in surprise. The Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in Diamonds was not just a title, Charles explained, but a recognition that would place her in the highest echelons of royal precedence, second only to senior members of the immediate royal family. The responsibilities that came with the title were equally significant. She would become the king's personal representative for special diplomatic missions, have the right to advise the crown on matters of state, and would be granted her own household with a substantial budget for charitable and diplomatic work. Most importantly, she would be given access to classified government briefings and would become a permanent member of the Privy Council. Catherine listened in stunned silence as the full implications of the offer became clear. This was not simply ceremonial recognition, but a fundamental change in her role within the monarchy. She would be moving from a supporting role to becoming one of the institution's key decision-makers. The honor would also make her the most senior woman in the order of precedence, outranking even princess and in formal situations. The king emphasized that the decision was entirely voluntary. He understood the additional pressures and responsibilities that would come with the position, and he would not think less of her if she chose to decline. However, he made it clear that he believed she was uniquely qualified for the role, and that the monarchy's future would be strengthened by her acceptance. Catherine asked for time to consider the offer and to discuss it with her husband, Prince William. The king agreed, but noted that the announcement was planned for the French state banquet in just 3 days. If she accepted, there would be little time for extensive preparation, though he assured her that his staff would provide all necessary support. That evening, Catherine walked through the palace gardens with William, sharing the extraordinary conversation she had just had with his father. The couple discussed the implications for their family, their children's future, and the additional scrutiny that would come with such a prominent position. William was supportive but concerned about the increased pressure on his wife, knowing how demanding her current duties already were. They talked late into the night, weighing the pros and cons of accepting such a historic honor. Catherine expressed her desire to serve the crown to the best of her abilities, but wondered if she was truly ready for such a significant responsibility. William reminded her of all she had already accomplished and his confidence in her abilities. The next morning, Catherine made her decision. She called the king's private secretary and requested another meeting. When she sat across from Charles that afternoon, her expression was calm but determined. She accepted the honor, understanding fully what it would mean for her life and her family's future. King Charles smiled with genuine pleasure at her acceptance. He had hoped she would say yes, but had prepared himself for the possibility that she might decline. With her agreement secured, the wheels were set in motion for one of the most significant royal announcements in decades. The palace staff began working around the clock to prepare for the ceremony that would take place in just 2 days. As Catherine left the king's study that afternoon, she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She understood that she was about to cross a threshold from which there would be no return. The Princess of Wales who entered that room was not the same woman who left it. In accepting the Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in Diamonds, she had agreed to take on a role that would define the rest of her life and potentially shape the future of the British monarchy itself. The palace erupted into controlled chaos the moment Catherine's acceptance was confirmed. Sir Clive Alderton immediately convened an emergency meeting of the king's most trusted advisors, while the Lord Chamberlain's office began reviewing centuries-old protocols for the ancient ceremony. The next 48 hours would test every department within the royal household as they worked to orchestrate an event that had not taken place for over 200 years. In the royal archives, a team of historians and ceremonial experts carefully examined dusty volumes and faded photographs, trying to piece together exactly how the investiture should be conducted. The last ceremony had been so long ago that no living person had ever witnessed it, and the written records, while detailed, left some aspects open to interpretation. Dr. Margaret Whitfield, the palace's chief historical consultant, found herself poring over Queen Victoria's personal diaries, searching for clues about the emotional significance the ceremony had held for previous recipients. Meanwhile, the royal jewelers received an urgent call to retrieve the diamond insignia from the secure vaults beneath the Tower of London. The piece itself was a masterwork of 18th-century craftsmanship, featuring 847 individual diamonds arranged in an intricate pattern around a central sapphire that had once belonged to Queen Anne. The jewelers had to work through the night to ensure the piece was properly cleaned and prepared, as it had not been worn since 1922. Catherine found herself in the unusual position of having to learn an entirely new set of protocols in less than 2 days. Lady Susan Hussey, one of the Queen's former ladies-in-waiting and an expert on royal ceremonial, was brought out of retirement to coach Catherine on the proper responses and movements required during the investiture. They practiced in a private room at Buckingham Palace, with Lady Susan playing the role of the king, while Catherine learned the ancient words and gestures that would be required of her. The ceremony itself would be unlike anything in recent royal history. Instead of the usual investitures that took place in the palace's ballroom, this ancient honor required a setting that reflected its historical significance. The decision was made to hold the ceremony in the throne room, a space normally reserved only for the most solemn state occasions. The room would need to be reconfigured to accommodate the specific requirements of the ceremony, while still allowing space for the select group of witnesses who would be present. Prince William found himself in the unique position of both supporting his wife and managing his own emotions about the historic moment. As heir to the throne, he understood better than anyone the significance of what was happening. The Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in diamonds had traditionally been seen as a recognition that could eventually lead to even greater responsibilities within the monarchy. Some royal historians suggested that the title had historically been a stepping stone to becoming a queen regent in times of crisis. The guest list for the ceremony required delicate diplomatic consideration. Only immediate family members and the most senior palace officials would witness the investiture itself, but the subsequent announcement at the French state banquet would be made before an audience of international dignitaries. The French president and his delegation had been quietly informed of the special nature of the evening's proceedings, though the specific details were kept confidential until the last moment. Catherine's personal staff worked frantically to prepare her for the dual events of the evening. Her dresser, Natasha Archer, had the challenging task of creating an ensemble that would be appropriate for both the solemn ceremony and the glittering state banquet that would follow. The decision was made to use 2 different outfits, with Catherine changing between the events to mark the transformation that the ceremony would represent. For the investiture, Catherine would wear a midnight blue velvet gown designed specifically for the occasion. The dress, created by Sarah Burton, incorporated subtle references to the historical significance of the moment, with embroidered details that echoed the diamond patterns of the insignia she would receive. The gown was designed to photograph beautifully in the formal portraits that would be taken immediately after the ceremony, images that would become part of the official royal collection. The state banquet outfit would be far more elaborate, befitting Catherine's new status within the royal hierarchy. She would wear the diamond Riviere necklace that had belonged to Queen Mary, along with the diamond earrings that had been a wedding gift from the late Queen Elizabeth II. The ensemble would clearly signal to the assembled dignitaries that they were witnessing a historic elevation in royal rank. Behind the scenes, the palace's communications team was preparing for the global media response to the announcement. Press releases had been drafted in multiple languages, and arrangements were being made for exclusive photographs to be distributed to major news outlets worldwide. The timing of the announcement was carefully coordinated to ensure maximum impact across different time zones, with special consideration given to coverage in Commonwealth countries. The kitchen staff at Buckingham Palace faced their own unique challenges in preparing for the evening. The French state banquet menu had been planned weeks in advance, but the addition of the investiture ceremony meant that timing would be even more critical than usual. The entire schedule had to be adjusted to accommodate the private ceremony, while ensuring that the banquet's 12 courses would still be served at the perfect temperature and presentation. Catherine spent her final day of preparation in a mixture of private study and family time. She wanted to ensure that her children understood what was happening, though the full implications would likely not become clear to them until years later. Prince George, as the future king, was given a slightly more detailed explanation of why his mother was receiving this special honor and what it would mean for their family's role in the monarchy. The evening before the ceremony, Catherine had a quiet dinner with William and the children at their private apartment in Kensington Palace. The normal chaos of family life provided a welcome contrast to the formal preparations that had consumed the previous 2 days. She helped Charlotte with her homework and played a board game with Louis, cherishing these ordinary moments before her life changed forever. That night, Catherine found it difficult to sleep. She lay awake thinking about the historical weight of the moment ahead and the women who had received this honor before her. She wondered what Princess Louise had felt on the night before her investiture, or whether Lady Mary Cambridge had experienced the same mixture of anticipation and responsibility that she was feeling now. The morning of the ceremony dawned gray and overcast, with a light rain falling on the streets of London. Catherine woke early and spent time in meditation and prayer, practices that had become increasingly important to her as her royal duties had expanded. She found comfort in the routine of her morning workout and the familiar process of preparing for a significant royal engagement. As she sat for her hair and makeup appointment, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From her middle-class upbringing in Bucklebury to her university days at St. Andrews, where she had met William, every step had somehow led to this extraordinary day. She thought about her parents, who would watch the banquet broadcast with pride and amazement at how far their daughter had come. The final preparations took place in an atmosphere of controlled anticipation. Palace staff moved with the precision of a military operation, each person understanding their crucial role in ensuring the success of the historic evening. As the afternoon progressed, the weight of 200 years of royal tradition seemed to settle over Buckingham Palace like an invisible blanket. Catherine's final appointment before the ceremony was with the king himself, a private meeting in which he shared his personal thoughts about the honor she was about to receive. He spoke about the responsibility that came with the title, but also about his confidence in her ability to fulfill the role with distinction. As they talked, both of them were aware that they were about to participate in a moment that would be remembered and studied by historians for generations to come. As the sun began to set over London, casting long shadows across the palace courtyard, Catherine made her way to her private dressing room for the final transformation. When she emerged, she would no longer be simply the Princess of Wales. She would be Dame Grand Cross Catherine, holder of one of the rarest honors in the British system, and one of the most influential women in the Commonwealth. The stage was set for a ceremony that would mark not just a personal milestone, but a defining moment in the modern history of the British monarchy. The throne room at Buckingham Palace had been transformed into a setting worthy of the historic ceremony about to take place within its walls. The massive crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the crimson and gold interior, while the twin thrones of state stood majestically at the far end of the room, flanked by the ancient banners of the order. The atmosphere was heavy with the weight of centuries of royal tradition, and the very air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Catherine stood in the anteroom just outside the throne room, her heart beating steadily despite the magnitude of the moment. The midnight blue velvet gown fitted her perfectly, the rich fabric catching the light as she moved. Lady Susan Hussey made final adjustments to the ceremonial sash that Catherine would wear, ensuring every detail was precisely correct according to the historical protocols they had studied so intensively. Through the partially open door, Catherine could see the small group of witnesses taking their places. Prince William stood near the throne, his formal court dress marking the solemnity of the occasion. His expression was one of quiet pride mixed with the gravity he understood this moment held for their family's future. Beside him, Princess Anne represented the senior generation of royals, her presence underlining the importance of what was about to transpire. King Charles entered the throne room wearing the full ceremonial dress of the order, including the spectacular diamond star that marked him as the sovereign of the order. The ancient insignia seemed to glow against the deep blue of his uniform, and the weight of the moment was evident in his measured steps as he approached the throne. This was not just a family occasion, but a a moment of constitutional significance that would resonate through the monarchy for generations. The Archbishop of Canterbury, called upon to provide the religious blessing that was part of the ancient ceremony, stood ready with the ceremonial book that contained the words spoken during previous investitures. The leather-bound volume had been specially retrieved from Canterbury Cathedral's archives, its pages containing prayers that had not been spoken in this context for over 2 centuries. As the great clock in the palace struck 7, the moment arrived. The Lord Chamberlain stepped forward and announced in a voice that echoed through the chamber, "Your Majesty, the Princess of Wales awaits your pleasure." The formal words, unchanged since the ceremony's creation, sent a shiver of recognition through everyone present that they were witnessing living history. Catherine entered the throne room with the graceful composure that had become her trademark, but those who knew her well could detect the heightened awareness in her eyes that marked this as an extraordinary moment. She walked slowly down the length of the room, her footsteps silent on the deep carpet, while the witnesses watched in reverent silence. As she reached the specified distance from the throne, Catherine performed the deep curtsy that protocol required, her training with Lady Susan evident in the perfection of her form. She remained in position as King Charles rose from the throne and began the ceremony with words that had first been spoken by King George III more than 200 years before. "Catherine Elizabeth, Princess of Wales." The king's voice rang clear and strong through the chamber. "You have served the crown with distinction and devotion that reflects the highest traditions of royal service. It is our pleasure to recognize your exceptional contributions to the realm and the Commonwealth by bestowing upon you the ancient and honorable title of Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in Diamonds." The king then gestured for Catherine to approach closer, and she moved forward with measured steps until she stood directly before the throne. The ceremony continued with the presentation of the ceremonial sword, an element that few people alive had ever seen. The blade, crafted specifically for this ceremony centuries before, bore inscriptions in Latin that spoke of service, duty, and honor. Catherine knelt on the crimson cushion that had been placed before the throne, the same cushion that had been used for every investiture of this order since its creation. As she knelt, she placed her hands on the ancient ceremonial Bible, its pages worn smooth by countless similar moments throughout British history. The weight of tradition seemed to settle around her shoulders like an invisible mantle. The king then spoke the words of investiture, his voice carrying the authority of centuries of monarchical tradition. "By the grace of God and the authority vested in us as sovereign of the Royal Victorian Order, we do hereby create you Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in Diamonds, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereunto appertaining." The moment of the actual investiture was breathtaking in its symbolism. King Charles lifted the diamond insignia from the velvet cushion held by the Lord Chamberlain and carefully placed it around Catherine's shoulders. The weight of the piece, both physical and metaphorical, was immediately apparent. The diamonds caught the light from the chandeliers and seemed to create their own constellation of stars against the dark blue of her gown. As the insignia settled into place, Catherine felt a profound sense of transformation. This was more than the receiving of an honor. It was a fundamental change in her relationship with the monarchy and her role in its future. The diamonds that now adorned her carried the history of every woman who had worn them before, and she could almost feel the presence of those remarkable women who had earned this recognition in previous centuries. The Archbishop stepped forward to offer the blessing that was an integral part of the ceremony. His words, spoken in the ancient cadences of the Church of England, called upon divine guidance for Catherine in her new role and asked for strength to fulfill the responsibilities that came with the honor. The prayer seemed to echo off the walls of the throne room, adding a spiritual dimension to the constitutional significance of the moment. Prince William watched with obvious emotion as his wife was transformed before his eyes. He understood better than anyone the personal sacrifice that accepting this honor represented, as well as the incredible opportunity it provided for Catherine to make a lasting impact on the monarchy's future. The pride in his expression was tempered by awareness of the additional pressures that would now be placed upon their family. The ceremony concluded with Catherine taking the oath that bound her to the specific duties of her new position. The words of the oath, largely unchanged since the order's founding, committed her to serve the crown with loyalty, to uphold the values of the monarchy, and to use her position for the benefit of the realm and its people. As she spoke each phrase, her voice grew stronger and more confident, reflecting her complete acceptance of the role she was assuming. When the oath was complete, King Charles gestured for Catherine to rise. As she stood, the full impact of her transformation was visible to everyone present. The woman who had knelt moments before was the same person, yet somehow fundamentally changed. The diamond insignia marked her new status, but it was the quiet confidence in her bearing that truly reflected the magnitude of what had just occurred. The king then spoke the final words of the ceremony, officially welcoming Catherine into the highest ranks of the order and acknowledging the new precedence she would hold within the royal family. His words carried both warmth and formality, reflecting both their family relationship and the constitutional significance of what had just transpired. The official photographs were taken immediately after the ceremony, with Catherine posed both individually and with the king to capture the historic nature of the investiture. These images would become part of the official royal collection and would likely be studied by historians and royal watchers for decades to come. The photographer worked quickly but carefully, understanding the importance of documenting every detail of the moment. As the formal ceremony concluded, the atmosphere in the throne room shifted slightly, becoming more personal as family members approached to congratulate Catherine on her new honor. William was the first to offer his congratulations, and the emotion in their brief exchange was evident to all present. Princess, and known for her practical nature, simply nodded her approval, but the warmth in her expression spoke volumes about her respect for Catherine's achievement. The transformation from ceremony to celebration was swift but dignified. Within moments, Catherine would need to change into her state banquet attire and prepare for the public announcement of her new title. But first, she was allowed a few minutes to absorb the magnitude of what had just occurred and to prepare mentally for the very different but equally important phase of the evening that lay ahead. As Catherine left the throne room, the diamond insignia caught the light one final time, sending sparkles of brilliance across the ancient walls. She was no longer simply the Princess of Wales who had entered that chamber less than an hour before. She was now Dame Grand Cross Catherine, holder of one of the rarest honors in the British system, and a woman whose influence on the monarchy's future had just been dramatically expanded. The private ceremony was complete, but the evening was far from over. In just 30 minutes, Catherine would make her first public appearance in her new role, standing beside King Charles as he announced her elevation to the assembled French dignitaries and international press. The intimate ceremony in the throne room had been about tradition and constitutional significance. The state banquet that followed would be about announcing to the world that the British monarchy had just gained one of its most powerful advocates for the 21st century. The state dining room at Buckingham Palace had never looked more magnificent. Crystal chandeliers cast their warm light over tables set with the finest royal china, while hundreds of flowers created cascades of color throughout the vast space. The assembled guests, including President Macron and the French delegation, along with senior British officials and international dignitaries, had no idea they were about to witness one of the most significant royal announcements in modern history. Catherine stood before her dressing room mirror as her team made the final adjustments to her state banquet ensemble. The transformation from the solemn ceremony attire to the glittering formal wear was dramatic and purposeful. The diamond Riviere necklace lay across her shoulders like liquid starlight, while Queen Elizabeth's diamond earrings caught every reflection of light in the room. But it was the new diamond insignia, now prominently displayed, that marked the most significant change in her appearance. The insignia of the Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in diamonds was designed to be noticed. Against the pristine white of her evening gown, the constellation of 847 individual diamonds created a display that was both beautiful and unmistakably significant. Anyone familiar with royal protocol would immediately recognize that something extraordinary had occurred, even before any official announcement was made. Natasha Archer stepped back to survey the completed ensemble, her trained eye checking every detail one final time. The gown, created specifically for this historic evening, incorporated subtle references to both British and French design traditions, appropriate for the diplomatic nature of the occasion. The cut was classic yet modern, reflecting Catherine's personal style while acknowledging the formal requirements of a state banquet. In the drawing room where the guests had assembled for pre-dinner drinks, speculation was already beginning to circulate. Several veteran royal watchers among the press corps had noticed unusual activity at the palace throughout the day, and the extended delay before the royal family's arrival had not gone unnoticed. President Macron himself had been quietly informed by the British ambassador that the evening would include a matter of particular significance, though no details had been provided. Prince William arrived first, his formal white tie and tails perfectly pressed, and his manner carrying just a hint of the excitement that had been building throughout the day. He moved through the crowd with his usual ease, but those who knew him well could detect an underlying anticipation in his demeanor. Tonight was not just another state dinner, and his awareness of what was to come was evident to careful observers. The French delegation, led by President Macron and his wife Brigitte, had been looking forward to this state visit as an opportunity to strengthen Anglo-French relations in the post-Brexit era. The careful choreography of such events was familiar to them, but they sensed that this particular evening carried additional weight beyond the usual diplomatic significance. King Charles entered the drawing room precisely on schedule, his bearing reflecting both the dignity of his position and the anticipation of the announcement he was about to make. He moved through the assembled guests with practiced ease, engaging in the diplomatic conversations that were an essential part of such occasions, while mentally preparing for the moment when he would reveal Catherine's new status to the world. The arrival of other senior royals added to the sense of occasion. Princess and the Duke of Edinburgh and other members of the royal family took their places in the receiving line, each aware that they were about to witness a moment that would be remembered and analyzed for decades to come. The presence of so many senior royals at what was ostensibly a routine state banquet was itself a signal that something unusual was planned. When Catherine finally made her entrance, the reaction was immediate and electric. The diamond insignia caught the light from the chandeliers and seemed to announce her transformed status before any words were spoken. Conversations paused as heads turned to observe her progress through the room, and several of the more experienced royal correspondents immediately began making notes about the unprecedented decoration she was wearing. President Macron, as the guest of honor, was among the first to greet Catherine, and his trained diplomatic eye immediately recognized that something significant had occurred. The warmth of his greeting was tinged with curiosity about the obvious elevation in Catherine's status, though protocol prevented him from asking direct questions about the change in her appearance. The progression from the drawing room to the state dining room followed the ancient choreography of royal banquets, with each guest taking their assigned position based on careful diplomatic precedents. However, Catherine's new status had resulted in subtle but significant changes to the seating arrangements, elevations that would be noticed by anyone familiar with royal protocol. As the guests took their seats around the horseshoe-shaped table, the full impact of Catherine's transformation became more apparent. The diamond insignia was clearly visible to everyone present, and its historical significance would not be lost on those familiar with royal orders and decorations. The placement of her chair had also been adjusted to reflect her new precedence within the royal hierarchy. The banquet began with the traditional ceremony of the loving cup, a ritual that dated back centuries and provided an appropriate bridge between the historical significance of the evening and its contemporary diplomatic purpose. As each course was served with military precision, the conversation flowed in multiple languages, creating the sophisticated international atmosphere that marked the best of royal entertaining. King Charles waited until the main course had been cleared before rising to make his remarks. The tradition of royal speeches at state banquets was well established, and guests expected to hear the usual diplomatic pleasantries about Anglo-French relations and international cooperation. What they were about to hear would far exceed those expectations. The king began with the customary acknowledgement of President Macron and the strong ties between Britain and France. He spoke eloquently about shared values and common challenges, while the assembled guests listened with the polite attention such occasions demanded. However, those who knew him well could detect an underlying excitement in his voice that suggested something more significant was coming. As his speech progressed, King Charles began to speak about the importance of recognizing exceptional service to the crown and the nation. He mentioned the long tradition of royal honors and the particular significance of those awards that recognized sustained excellence and dedication. The guests listened with growing attention, sensing that this was leading somewhere beyond the usual diplomatic rhetoric. The moment of revelation came with dramatic timing. King Charles paused in his remarks and turned slightly toward Catherine, his gesture immediately focusing the attention of everyone present on the Princess of Wales. The diamond insignia seemed to pulse with reflected light as all eyes turned toward her, creating a moment of perfect theatrical tension. Tonight, the king announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed dining room. It gives me extraordinary pleasure to announce that Her Royal Highness the Princess of Wales has this evening been invested with the Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in Diamonds, an honor that has not been bestowed for over 200 years. The reaction was immediate and profound. Several guests audibly gasped at the significance of the announcement, while others leaned forward in their chairs, trying to fully process what they had just heard. President Macron's expression reflected both surprise and admiration, while the British officials present showed a mixture of pride and amazement at the historic nature of the moment. King Charles continued his remarks, explaining the historical significance of the honor and the exceptional circumstances that had led to its revival. He spoke about Catherine's contributions to the crown and the nation, her diplomatic achievements, and her embodiment of the values the monarchy sought to represent in the modern world. Catherine herself remained composed throughout the announcement, though those sitting nearest to her could see the emotion in her eyes. The weight of the moment, the presence of international dignitaries, and the knowledge that her life had just been permanently transformed created a powerful mixture of feelings that she managed to contain with characteristic grace. The applause that followed the king's announcement was sustained and heartfelt, with guests rising to their feet in recognition of both the historic nature of the honor and their respect for Catherine personally. President Macron was among the first to offer his congratulations, speaking warmly about Catherine's contributions to international relations and expressing France's pleasure at witnessing such a significant royal occasion. As the applause died down and the guests resumed their seats, the atmosphere in the room had fundamentally changed. What had begun as a formal state banquet had become a celebration of a historic royal moment, and the conversation that resumed was animated with discussion of the unprecedented nature of what they had just witnessed. The remainder of the evening took on a celebratory quality that transcended its diplomatic purpose. The careful protocol of the state banquet continued, but it was now infused with the excitement of having witnessed a truly historic moment. Conversations buzzed with analysis of the significance of Catherine's elevation and speculation about what it might mean for the future of the monarchy. As the final toasts were made and the evening drew to its close, Catherine found herself surrounded by well-wishers from among the international guests. Each conversation reinforced the global significance of what had occurred, as diplomats and dignitaries from around the world offered their congratulations and expressed their understanding of the honor's importance. When the guests finally began to depart, Catherine stood with King Charles and Prince William in the grand entrance hall, accepting final congratulations and farewells. The diamond insignia continued to catch the light, serving as a visible reminder of the transformation that had occurred over the course of the evening. As the last of the guests departed into the London night, Catherine remained in the state dining room for a few quiet moments, surrounded by the remnants of the evening's celebration. The room that had witnessed so many important moments in royal history had just added another chapter to its story, and she was now permanently part of that narrative. The evening had been a complete success, both as a diplomatic occasion and as the public announcement of Catherine's historic elevation. The news would spread around the world within hours, carried by the international press and diplomatic channels. By morning, the entire world would know that Princess Catherine had become Dame Grand Cross Catherine, holder of one of the rarest honors in the British system and one of the most influential women in the Commonwealth. Dawn broke over London with the city awakening to news that would dominate headlines around the globe. As the first rays of sunlight touched the windows of Buckingham Palace, the historic events of the previous evening were already reverberating through international media, diplomatic channels, and social networks worldwide. The announcement of Princess Catherine's elevation to Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in Diamonds had become one of the most significant royal stories of the century. Catherine herself woke in her private apartments at Kensington Palace, the diamond insignia carefully stored in its secure case nearby. The weight of the previous evening's transformation was immediately apparent as she checked her phone and saw the flood of messages from family, friends, and official contacts around the world. The magnitude of global interest in her new honor was both gratifying and slightly overwhelming. The international press had worked through the night to analyze and report on the historic announcement. Major newspapers in every capital city led with the story, while royal correspondents scrambled to provide context about the rare honor and its significance. The BBC's royal correspondent described it as the most significant elevation in royal status since the Queen Mother's appointment as Queen Consort, while CNN called it a defining moment for the modern monarchy. In newsrooms across the Commonwealth, editors were hastily arranging special coverage of the story. The Australian Broadcasting Corporation cleared its morning programming to provide extended analysis of what Catherine's new status would mean for Australia's relationship with the monarchy. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation brought in constitutional experts to explain the implications of the appointment for Canada's role within the Commonwealth. President Macron, back at the French ambassador's residence, was already fielding calls from the Élysée Palace about the previous evening's extraordinary events. The French press was particularly interested in the timing of the announcement during the state visit, and diplomatic analysts were praising the symbolic significance of sharing such a historic moment with France's leadership. Social media platforms exploded with reaction to the news. The official royal family accounts posted the formal photographs from the investiture ceremony, images that immediately went viral across every platform. Within hours, hashtags related to Catherine's new title were trending worldwide, with millions of users sharing their reactions to the historic announcement. The response from Commonwealth leaders was swift and overwhelmingly positive. The Prime Ministers of Australia, Canada, and New Zealand issued statements congratulating Catherine on her elevation and expressing their nation's continued commitment to the monarchical system. The symbolic importance of the appointment was not lost on these leaders, who understood its significance for strengthening ties between Britain and the Commonwealth realms. At Buckingham Palace, the communications team was working at full capacity to manage the unprecedented global interest in the story. Phone lines were constantly busy with requests for interviews and additional information, while the palace website crashed temporarily due to the volume of traffic from people seeking details about the rare honor Catherine had received. Catherine's first official engagement following her investiture was a private meeting with the Commonwealth Secretary-General, who had requested an urgent audience to discuss the implications of her new status for Commonwealth relations. The meeting, held in the 1844 room at Buckingham Palace, provided Catherine with her first taste of how her new role would expand her diplomatic responsibilities. The Secretary-General explained how Catherine's appointment had been received with enormous enthusiasm throughout the Commonwealth, particularly in smaller nations where the monarchy remained deeply popular. Her new status would allow her to undertake official visits and diplomatic missions that had previously been beyond her formal authority, opening up new possibilities for strengthening Commonwealth ties. Meanwhile, historians and constitutional experts were working to provide context for the public about the extraordinary nature of Catherine's elevation. Professor Sarah Bradford, a leading expert on royal history, explained to the BBC that the Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in Diamonds was essentially a recognition that the recipient is considered one of the most important figures in the Commonwealth, with influence and authority second only to the immediate royal family. The financial markets responded positively to the news, with analysts suggesting that Catherine's elevation indicated stability and continuity within the monarchy during a period of global uncertainty. The pound strengthened slightly against major currencies, while tourism industry stocks rose on expectations of increased interest in royal attractions and events. In the diplomatic community, the announcement was being analyzed for its strategic implications. Several foreign ambassadors to the court of St. James had requested urgent meetings with the Foreign Office to discuss how Catherine's new status might affect their bilateral relationships with Britain. The consensus was that her elevation represented a strengthening of Britain's commitment to personal diplomacy and relationship building. The response from the British public was overwhelmingly positive, with opinion polls showing approval ratings for the decision exceeding 80%. Street interviews conducted by news teams found consistent themes of pride in Catherine's achievements and satisfaction that her contributions to public service had been formally recognized at the highest level. Religious leaders also weighed in on the significance of the appointment. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who had participated in the investiture ceremony, issued a statement praising Catherine's exemplary service to the nation and the Commonwealth, and expressing confidence that her new role would be a source of strength and inspiration for people of all faiths. International fashion houses immediately began analyzing the ensemble Catherine had worn for the state banquet, with particular attention to how the diamond insignia had been incorporated into her overall look. Several major designers praised the elegant way the historic piece had been showcased, and speculation began about how Catherine might incorporate the insignia into future formal appearances. The educational value of the moment was not lost on schools throughout the Commonwealth. Teachers used the announcement as an opportunity to discuss constitutional monarchy, the role of honors in recognizing service, and the history of the royal family with their students. Many schools reported increased interest in their citizenship and government studies programs following the widespread coverage of Catherine's elevation. As the day progressed, more details emerged about the specific responsibilities that would accompany Catherine's new status. Palace sources confirmed that she would be given her own diplomatic budget and staff, allowing her to undertake independent missions on behalf of the crown. She would also gain access to classified government briefings and would participate in high-level policy discussions about Commonwealth affairs. The artistic community responded with particular enthusiasm to the news. The Royal Academy announced plans for a special exhibition celebrating women who had held the Dame Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order in diamonds, while the National Portrait Gallery confirmed that Catherine's official portrait in her new role would be commissioned from a leading contemporary artist. International universities began reaching out to offer Catherine honorary degrees and visiting positions, recognizing that her new status made her one of the most influential women in global affairs. Several institutions expressed particular interest in her potential contributions to programs focusing on diplomacy, international relations, and Commonwealth studies. The impact on tourism was immediate and substantial. Tour operators reported a surge in bookings for royal-themed visits to London, while hotels near Buckingham Palace were quickly booked solid by visitors hoping to catch a glimpse of Catherine in her new role. The economic impact of royal events was well documented, and this historic appointment promised to generate significant additional revenue for the British tourism industry. As evening approached, Catherine prepared for her first official appearance in her new role, a reception for Commonwealth diplomats at St. James's Palace. The event, hastily arranged to capitalize on the global attention surrounding her elevation, would provide an opportunity for her to begin exercising the expanded diplomatic authority that came with her new status. The reception brought together representatives from all 54 Commonwealth nations, creating a unique opportunity for Catherine to demonstrate how her new role would enhance Britain's relationships with these crucial partners. Her conversations with each delegation were closely watched by diplomatic observers, who noted the increased deference being shown to her compared to previous interactions. The day concluded with a private family dinner at Kensington Palace, where Catherine was finally able to process the magnitude of the previous 24 hours with her immediate family. Prince William spoke proudly of how gracefully she had handled the intense global attention, while their children peppered her with questions about what her new title would mean for their own futures. As London settled into evening, the global conversation about Catherine's historic elevation continued across time zones. Newspapers in Asia were preparing their coverage for the morning editions, while television programs in the Americas were planning special segments about the rare royal honor and its significance. The transformation was complete. In the span of just one extraordinary day, Princess Catherine had not only received one of the rarest honors in the British system, but had also demonstrated to the world that she was ready to embrace the expanded responsibilities that came with it. The global response had exceeded all expectations, confirming that her elevation represented not just a personal milestone, but a defining moment for the modern monarchy. As she reflected on the day's events before retiring for the evening, Catherine understood that she had crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. The woman who had awakened that morning was fundamentally different from the one preparing for sleep. Dame Grand Cross Catherine was now one of the most influential women in the Commonwealth, carrying the hopes and expectations of millions of people who saw in her appointment a symbol of the monarchy's continued relevance and strength in the 21st century.